Moist. 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 I'm sorry, I had to do it. Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Anyway, I'm back. So, breaking news today. Florida citizens are blaming the government today for not being warned prior about Hurricane Ian. Whoever is blaming, you guys are more dense than lead. Like seriously, like bruv. Like bruv. Like, oh my god. Like, oh my god. Hurricanes are the most predictable thing ever. I'm going to watch the YouTube Self-Disturbed Family channel. Oh man, I can feel that.
Chances are, when you think of a YouTube family channel, you picture something along the lines of this.
What's good, YouTube? You already know what it is. Hey, what's up, TPO5?
These overproduced videos have become the norm in the realm of family-centric content, garnering an equal amount of both fans and critics alike, with some of the main criticisms across the board being exploitation and manipulation. The idea that these parents paint themselves as having these perfect families, when in reality they primarily view their children through the lens of content creation, often
Come closer for the video. Come closer. Act like you're crying. Go like this. No, Mom, I'm not just using. No, I know, but go like this for the video.
with their glaring motivation being to make obscene amounts of money and gain worldwide
Job.
fame. But if you look deeper,
No different than child exploitation. True pieces of shit on the platform should be rooted out, should be banned.
actually looks something more like this. Wholesome moments captured by parents not as a way to make money or gain fame, but to immortalize memories that otherwise might someday be forgotten. With these videos often accounting for
That's one reason I want to start my channel. I want to immortalize these memories.
in our world, there are always
I don't want to let them
lies.
slip away.
Buried within these perfectly inconspicuous accounts lies
You can
one
almost view my channel as my
the
brain.
story is
I'm
so
trying to remember
evil
things. It's like
that
some
it
sort
can
of
be
storage
described as
data.
one of YouTube's most disturbed family channels.
Jennifer Fart, what do we know about her?
We weren't deep. That love was a fake. They loved their children.
Before we get into today's case, I want to first thank our sponsor, Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep is a premium mattress company that offers personalized beds to fit your specific sleeping needs. By using their Helix Sleep quiz, which takes into account what kind of sleeper you are and what kind of mattress you prefer, before pairing you with a mattress of your dreams. At first, I was a bit skeptical about buying a mattress online and not being able to test it in person, but I actually did take the Helix Sleep quiz and received one of their mattresses over a month ago.
He has a husky!
February 16th, 2008, Jennifer Hart begins her
Ooh,
own
that's a long
personal
time
YouTube
ago.
channel, using the account for browsing and liking videos, though never really having time to upload her own. Just 2 years prior, in 2006, Jen and her soon-to-be wife Sarah had adopted 3 children, Abigail, Hannah, and Marquise. And though taking on this many kids at once seemed to be a daunting task, the Harts actually embraced the challenge, loving it so much that just 2 years later, in 2008, they would adopt 3 more children, Sierra, Devante, and Jeremiah. To add the cherry on top of their newly formed family, the couple would tie the knot in 2009, and in the span of just 3 years, the
Oh.
Scarlet Sweethearts had become the married mothers of 6. Taking all
Oh,
this into account, it makes sense why Jen wouldn't have the free
but
time to post on her
where does
channel.
it go
This
wrong?
would eventually change by the end of 2011, when her very first video went live. This wholesome clip would kick off a rather consistent streak of uploads throughout the following
That's
year,
cute.
with each having a focus on Jen's children, and specifically the many adventures that they shared. In some clips, we see the kids dancing at music festivals, or exploring the wilderness on a group hike.
Okay, my favorite family channel is Violet First. I know it's loud and obnoxious, but at least they do skits that makes everybody laugh their ass off.
Making it seem apparent that the Harts were in fact a happy family. But not just that, they also clearly had strong morals as well, with these festivals that they often attended always being themed around the idea of love and inclusivity. At one point, they even uploaded a performance featuring 4 of the children, with lyrics further asserting their desire to make the world a more unified place.
That's wholesome.
At Mint Mobile, we're always
But-
looking for innovative ways to save you money.
well-
So you can keep paying $15 a month for premium wireless.
Well, where does it go wrong? That's adorable.
All in all, it's a rather touching account, with one of the younger sons, Devante, clearly being the star of the show, as the camera always seemed to be on him, with the young boy even having a few solo performances on the channel. And though I'm sure they
Man's got some moves. Woo!
not hard to tell that he was the clear favorite of the bunch.
This dude looks like he could do good on Dancing with the Stars, if you had to have my honest opinion.
Sign that reads "free hugs." Devante would wear this to many of the family's public outings, and in turn attract a large amount of attention that Jen would then film and publish on her social media pages, which wasn't exclusive to just YouTube, as she was even more active across her Facebook page, posting pictures and stories about her children, including multiple photos of the infamous free hug sign, a sign that was about to thrust the family into the public eye for the very first time.
There is growing outrage tonight after an unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson.
The killing
Oh.
of Michael Brown Jr., a rally was held in Portland, Oregon, opposing racial injustice. And for the Hart family, this call for unity fit perfectly with their perceived beliefs. So Sarah and Jen took the children to the protest, where Devante would again wear his signature sign, leading to this moment being captured by cameras. It was an incredibly inspiring and optimistic picture that would immediately be shared all across the world, with most of us having probably seen this at some point in our
Oh.
lives, whether we remember it or not. And not only did it represent hope for so many across the country, it also perfectly encapsulated the message that the Harts were trying to send. They clearly wanted to be perceived as this loving family who stood firmly against hate, which, just based on their content, they truly seemed to be, despite the fact that it was all nothing more than a facade.
Oh no.
Across Jen's Facebook page, she mentions numerous times that Abigail, Hannah, and Marquise were her and Sarah's first children, even saying how Abigail was the first of her children that she ever held in her arms, adding that that was the moment she became a mother. And as sweet as these words are, they technically aren't completely true. In reality, one full year before Jen and Sarah adopted their first group of children, they had actually fostered another child, a teenage girl named Lee. Together, the three lived peacefully for around 6 months with no real issues, though around the end of this time, something seemingly switched within the mothers, and for Jen specifically. Suddenly, they grew cold towards their new child, often picking fights or even just ignoring her for days on end. They also started to constantly complain to friends about having to take care of her, and they didn't seem to be taking their roles as mothers very seriously. At one point, they had remarked to friends that they had caught Lee on numerous occasions rummaging through the trash and looking for food, which further added to this strange, newfound tension within the household. Despite this fighting, however, the mothers would eventually agree that Lee would be able to stay with them until she was 18, also adding that she was going to have to take on the role of being a big sister, as they were planning on adopting 3 children. And though they had their rocky moments, Lee was just relieved that she had a place to stay. However, just 1 week after meeting what would become their first group of adopted kids, Jen and Sarah would drop Lee off at her standard therapy appointment, and and never return. Lee was obviously devastated by their abandonment, but perhaps most hurtful of all was the fact that Jen and Sarah never spoke to or even about Lee ever again, immediately moving on to their new children and parading their loving household
Just
all
bury
over
them.
social media, while essentially rewriting Lee out of their family's history. This treatment of their first foster child immediately calls into question the online persona of the Hart family, as there was nothing loving about the way they left Lee. But on this note, you might be wondering, why would they even have to sell an online persona? Looking at the aforementioned popular family channels, there's a very clear reason why they manipulate their audience. Money. This type of content is some of the most lucrative on all of YouTube, and given these parents' desperation for the limelight and wealth, they would do just about anything for it, including exploiting their kids and manipulating their audience. But just looking at Jen's channel, it's obvious that this was never going to make her wealthy and famous. But despite this, these mothers did actually have a good reason to put on this facade, as they weren't aiming to manipulate the entire world, but instead, they were merely trying to manipulate those around them. In 2008, one of the Hart children, Hannah, was stopped by her teacher after noticing a large bruise on the young girl's arm, and when questioned about how she had gotten it, Hannah would admit that her mother, Jen, had struck her with a belt. This incident with other classmates and taking food from the trash, just like Lee had done years before. Though immediately after being questioned about this, Jen would pull all of her children out of school and have them spend the remainder of the year being homeschooled, with the case being closed soon after. The following year, the Hart children would be allowed to return to school, seemingly when Jen thought they were in the clear. However, at the end of 2010, an eerily similar instance would occur. One school day, Abigail Hart would complain to one of her teachers of having pain in her stomach area, and when asked exactly where it hurt, she said that she had owies on her stomach and back, before adding, "Mom hit me." Again, this incident would be investigated by police, who this time would interview each of the Hart children separately, which is where Abigail would admit that her mother had held her head under cold water before striking her with a closed fist, and all because she had supposedly stolen a penny.
A penny?
On top of this, the other kids would explain how their mothers often hit them as well, and rarely allowed them to eat. Sarah would go on to deny these allegations of neglect, but she would admit to having hit Abigail, a confession that led to her being arrested for domestic abuse and eventually spending 90 days in prison. Though there are some discrepancies here with this story, as some have reported that Abigail had actually said that it was Jen who had hit her, and that Sarah was merely taking the fall for her. But either way, Sarah would serve her sentence in April of 2011. Things didn't stop there, however, as after Sarah's release, Hannah Hart would go to the nurse's office and begin begging for food, claiming that her parents were again refusing to feed her, and that she hadn't eaten all day. In response, Sarah claimed that she was merely playing the quote-unquote food card, and proceeded to immediately pull all of the kids out of school once again, to which this time they would never return, as the family packed their bags and moved from Minnesota to Oregon
Asshole.
overnight. And conveniently enough, it was right after this move that Jen started her consistent posting across social.
I'm not shaming them because they love each other and they're in a same-sex marriage. I'm shaming them because they abuse people. Remember, I don't care your identity as long as you're not harming other people. Like if you do not harm another person who does not deserve it, then you're fine in my book. But the moment you lay your hands on an innocent person, that's when I draw the line and I have to say, no. I do not appreciate that. And these kids do not either. And it sucks because they're probably going to get their community some bad hate and reputation because of their stupid actions.
Just based on the timing alone and their hyperfixation on peace, immediately following all of these horrible accusations, I don't think it's crazy to assume that these videos were uploaded in an attempt to repair the family's image, and even to potentially thwart criticism or investigation into their alleged abuse. Singing the phrase, "we are so provided for," over and over again, conveniently right after their parents were questioned about neglecting their kids.
We are so
That's a lot of leather jackets on them. Bet you could probably
This
see
isn't
them
pure
starving.
speculation either. These parents had a legitimate history of abuse, both proven and alleged. Plus, between the multiple instances of children desperately rummaging through the garbage for food, and the claims that they were never fed, made this family truly seem like a nightmare. And based on this, realistically, no one would or should view them as a model family. Yet that's exactly what they were to friends and family. In fact, one close friend would later state that everyone was envious of them. They were the perfect people with the perfect kids. And this is in large part due to their posting on social media, making it clear that this online facade was in fact working, despite the fact that behind the scenes, the horrors within their home were only getting worse.
Oh boy.
Here's the problem. Nobody knows what Hulu Plus
Hey guys, this is gonna start escalating to like them literally being chained in the basement and all that shit. If that's what he means by getting worse, then that's the only thing I can envision when he says that.
Having been aware of the family's sudden and suspicious move, authorities would launch an investigation into the Harts, revealing just how controlling the mothers were. In the home, the children were not allowed to speak unless they raised their hands. They were not allowed to wish each other happy birthday, and they were not allowed to laugh at the dinner table.
Okay, F these assholes, man.
Jen spoke of on her
The moment you put those rules in my house, like, I don't care. Like, literally, I'd rather be in a household where I worked and I actually did chores than to be in a household where, like, if you speak, raise your... No. Free speech. Yeah, you can suck it. Like, honestly, you suck butthole. You like the dirtiest part of my butthole. If you think that.
voice. On top of this, the children were also severely underfed, as the two mothers used food as a means of further controlling them, thus explaining why
What
they were
a
always
bitch
confused.
move.
And if you look back at the videos on Jen's channel, you start to realize that the kids are incredibly skinny, and they appear far younger than their actual ages. with
Oh
some
my
animals
God.
pointing out that the animals seemed better fed than the actual kids themselves.
They really
But
do.
despite these findings and the history of
Let's say they
abuse,
probably put
the
tons of
experimentation
clothing on them
was
to
not
make them
pressing
not look
charges.
skinny.
And one interesting note here is that the investigation lasted through the bulk of 2012.
They probably want to
which was
put
the
those
same
jackets
time
on.
that Jen
And
just
it's not me being
happened to be
weird,
the most
I
active
promise.
on her YouTube channel,
But seriously,
just further adding to the
if I had a kid and I was an abusive asshole and I didn't want people to see that they're skinny, I'd put a big old jacket on them. That's a perfect way to cover up your BS.
This page was designed
I
to
know how
distract
people
from
cover their shit up.
mystery, but now, with the police at least for
I
the
really
moment
do.
off their trail, the abuse only continued. In 2017, the Hart family would move to the state of Washington, where one night at 1:30 a.m., their next-door neighbor would receive a knock at the door. Standing there was Hannah Hart, the consistent whistleblower of her parents' abuse, who had jumped from her second-story bedroom to escape her house before telling the neighbor, "Don't make me go back. They are racist and they abuse us." Moments later, Sarah and Jen grabbed the child and brought her back.
Is that so?
Upon being questioned by the neighbor,
Two wives are racist. That is completely ironic. Somebody who's in a minority group abusing another minority group. That's ironic.
Robert, I just can't live with it. I'm very concerned for these kids. I just can't let this go any longer. Those kids, I think, is in very serious danger.
Only to be immediately brushed off, with a patrol car never being sent out.
Damn it.
From that moment on, however, these same neighbors, the DeKalbs, kept a watchful eye over the family, noticing their bizarre patterns and mistreatment of the children. And before long,
Whoever these parents are, I hope you honestly get a raise. I hope you walk into your job, honestly. Like, I honestly hope that these guys who are keeping the eyes out for the kids, I hope they go to the job and learn that they get a raise. Honestly. They deserve that. Because they're doing something that these parents should be doing, but are not. It's insane, honestly. Like, honestly, that is so scummy. Being part of a minority group, and then hating another minority group. Oh my god, that is... Oh. Do you see that? That is so cool. Watch this. That is so cool. Let me keep going.
Which he soon began doing on a daily basis, sometimes visiting as many as 3 times a day, while also subtly mentioning that they were all being abused and that they desperately needed help. And having finally heard enough, the Diatlofs again called 911, which prompted an immediate response from
The what? The
with the abused that they desperately needed help. And having finally heard enough, the Diatlofs again called
Cobbs.
911,
Shout out to the Cobbs, honestly. Shout out to them.
Social and Health Services launching an investigation into the family. On March 23, 2018, the agency would stop by the Hart house and ring the doorbell, though they received no answer. 3 days later, on the 26th, they would arrive once again, garnering the same results. This time noticing that a stone wall on the driveway had seemingly been destroyed.
What?
Tire marks leading. 26th, they would arrive once again, garnering the same results. This time noticing that a stone wall on the driveway had seemingly been destroyed, with tire marks leading up to it, insinuating that the Harts had left in a hurry, as by that point, it was already too late. Sarah and Jen were obsessed with control, so much so that they would starve their children to more easily manipulate them.
Shit, they're gone.
Control branched past their home, as they wanted to shape the public's opinion on the family by using social media
I'm
to
not.
spread
Okay, please know that. What's it called?
their lies and erase their.
Please, no. I'm not a defund the police person. I'm not a plebeian. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a loser like that. But these cops are somewhat in the wrong. I know they probably couldn't do anything. They should have launched an investigation. I think any time that you hear about a child abuse, like, being a thing, you should probably, there should be like a 95% chance you should go investigate that. If not, a 99.999% chance you should investigate that. Because even if there isn't something, like, what if this is the case? Because they didn't check, they could have stopped this right now.
But with their own children,
I don't want to be too harsh on the police, though. They do everything they can.
Criminal charges now likely looming in the distance, they began to realize that this control was slipping away, and they couldn't bear the thought of it. So the day after the Department of Health and Services had gone to their home, Sarah and Jen would load their children in their vehicle and begin a road trip to California. And while driving on State Highway 1, Jen would pull the vehicle off the road towards a scenic overwatch, bring the vehicle to a complete stop, and then slam on the gas, driving the car directly off a 100-foot cliff into the rocky waters below, the result of which leaving no survivors.
Oh my god.
Initially, those close to the family swore up and down that this had to be an accident, as after all, they were the primary targets of the Harts media.
Not an accident.
Though any thought of this being
That's a good place to go commit suicide. From things that my mom has said, my mom has told me, literally, from going there a few, like, months ago, that's a steep drop. That is, man, you could put it on accident, there's no proof. But honestly, it's damning. They couldn't take the heat in the kitchen. They couldn't. So they cowardly just jumped off. I'm not saying suicidal people are cowardly. I'm saying they're cowards. They took their kids' lives. They're murderers. Because they couldn't stand the retribution of their awful actions. Truly a sad case.
Would quickly be thwarted by Sarah's search history, as during their road trip she had looked up, can 500 milligrams of Benadryl kill a 125-pound woman?
Holy shit.
How long does it take to die from hypothermia while drowning in a car? It would also be determined that Jen was heavily intoxicated during the time of the crash, and that the
Yep, cowards. This is a suicide or a murder.
In their sandwiches, with Sarah herself having taken 42 of the pills, proving that this entire event was in fact orchestrated.
It's a murder.
Sarah. The red flags, the warning signs, they were all there. But to those on the front lines of the Harts propaganda, this was the shock of a lifetime. But between the loving posts, the family pictures, and the heartwarming videos, how much of it was actually...
This just proves that sometimes the most happiest of places need to be looked under a microscope to see if there's nothing between the cracks.
on Jen's social media were in fact staged, with one cameraman who had photographed the family stating that Jen does this thing with her Facebook page where the kids pose and are made to look like one big happy family, but after the photo, they go back to looking lifeless. While another witness claimed that the starving kids were given food as a reward for posing for these photos. And on Jen's YouTube channel specifically, it seems to be more of the same, as although these clips may seem so natural and normal, the reality is that they too were planned by Jen, with the smoking gun being one video clip in particular in which she made a critical editing mistake.
Was that her kid? I can almost see the fear in their eyes.
In it, Jen forgets to edit out the beginning, which shows the kids waiting and staring at her as she directs them on where to stand. Each child has an empty and fearful look in their eyes.
Yeah, I could see it, the fear in their eyes.
Being moved into the perfect position, the children then begin to walk naturally, as if they were being impromptu recorded on just a regular hike. It is an extremely chilling video in which we get to see the influence of Jen.
Because in the happy family photo, there's mess ups, and everybody's laughing and having fun. You could feel the energy, but here it's just dull, dead, almost ghastly, honestly. There's no life, there's no happiness, there's no energy here.
And to make it all the more terrifying is the fact that throughout the rest of her channel, the kids often have this same look in their eyes, showing us that even these seemingly unplanned, spur-of-the-moment videos were likely staged and controlled, at least in part.
I'm gonna look at their kids' eyes again.
Which we get to see the position. The children then begin to walk them on where to stand.
Or one of the kids' eyes.
One video clip in particular.
I'm gonna kick this in the best quality I can put it in. Give me a second. I know a little secret. I know how to tell something.
In it, Jen forgets to edit out the beginning, which shows the kids waiting and staring at her as she directs them on where to stand. Each child has an empty and fearful. In it, Jen forgets to edit out the beginning, which shows the kids waiting and staring at her as she directs them on where to stand. Each child has an empty.
I think their eyes, I don't know if it's just because of the way their skull is shaped, but their eyes seem maybe a little bit darker. And this actually, darkness or blue around the eyes, if I'm not wrong, could actually point towards malnutrition. Let me search it up. What happens when the area around your eyes turn blue or black? Cause being tired or something. Oh wait, hold on.
And to make it all the more terrifying is the fact that throughout the rest of her channel,
is
kids often have this
blue
same look
around
showing
the
us that even
eyes
these
a sign
spur-of-the-moment
of
videos were likely staged and controlled, at least in part, by Jen and Sarah.
It can break down quickly, creating dry spots on the surface of the eye. Dry eye syndromes are common for older age. I don't know. I'm not a medical person, so take that info with a grain of salt, please.
How much she regretted adopting them. They preached veganism on both of their Facebook pages, yet when police searched their home following the crash, they found a fridge full of meat. They stood firmly against racism online, yet given the testimony of Hannah and others around the family, many believe that they were actually themselves racist.
Come on!
Calling them as white supremacists. And finally, they preached peace. Yet for years they beat their children and eventually stole their lives. And if there's any question as to how
those kids could have grown up to be so good in college, could have contributed to society, have good families, but they're gone.
I'll tell you, none of that lines up with the people that we all knew. Jen and Sarah really were the kind of parents that I think the world desperately needs.
We weren't duped. That love was fake. They loved their children. They weren't white supremacists. They just were isolated. They were in pain.
Even to this day, with the years of abuse and the final act of murder on full display, some friends of the Harts still remain in denial,
Ass.
refusing to believe that they had been played.
Denial is the first stage of grief.
Is undeniable, with other friends having come to terms with the betrayal by stating things like,
You know what? It sucks. Like, for example, the guy that voices the captain on Wall-E, or the dad on the Goldbergs, has actually come out to be possibly a groomer, which sucks. I think there's allegations, but they're really damn. And now I'm gonna listen to the captain from Wall-E. That's gonna leave a stain. And instead of just canceling Wall-E, it's a term I had to come with. Like that guy's a bad person, and it sucks. Stuff like that sucks. It really does.
myself included, it's easy to see how
None of these kids deserved what was coming to them. The bad thing is because they're kids, they almost don't know that they probably think some of their lives are similar.
The most substantial of all these witnesses was the neighbor of the Harts, a man who got to witness the family when their guard was let down and look past the facade and see them for who they truly were.
You know, there's a lot of people online.
This is creepy, honestly. Like a family just hiding itself like a shell.
It's not what we saw next door.
A beautiful looking egg with a
But as the
dead
story comes to a close,
chicken
there's
inside
one
of it.
detail that still needs to be addressed.
Looks good on the outside. When you crack the egg open, it's just
Earlier it was
awful
mentioned that Devante
death.
was very much
Ghastly
the star of the
sight.
show on Jen and Sarah's social media. He was clearly the best player of the bunch, and given that essentially every post seemed to include him or just straight up be centered around him, it's not hard to
Fair.
see that he was
What?
others. And why is this important to mention now?
What? Watch doggies?
Can you just ride the
Well,
cart out
because
there? I have it out
Yeah.
right outside the window.
Mhm.
And throw 3 flakes of hay. 1 for Big and 1.5 or 2 for Cheese and Nero.
Mhm.
And it's right there. You should be okay.
Yeah.
And get on your...
his body has never been found. Despite an exhaustive search, Devante's remains have never been discovered, not even a single bone fragment, leaving some convinced that the hearts allowed him to run away and start a new life, as after all, he was the favorite, while others believe that he may have actually been killed before the crash, as perhaps the mothers had taken his life upon discovering once again that he was out begging for food, with his body being buried somewhere else, though to this day, his true whereabouts remain a mystery. And despite his missing body, a judge would later rule that he likely died within the car alongside his family, which is most likely the case, though some still aren't
Where did the
convinced,
body
as
go?
if
You
were
can't
any
just
other child,
destroy
might
it
be
unless you have like a
easier to
vat of acid or
accept.
something.
But the fact that it was him, the golden child, just makes it all so particularly haunting.
It is. It's creepy.
Looking back at the Jen Hart channel, now with her entire family having perished by her own hands, is indescribably dark, and it represents one of the most unique and disturbed forms of manipulation that I have ever seen on this site.
No, really, I didn't even
The
see this
long-time
happening.
history of this family makes it no surprise to me that
Well
something
done,
of this
report,
nature
Nick.
ended up happening.
Well
But that's
done.
all thanks to hindsight. At the time, if you wanted to know about the Hart family, this is what you would find. Wholesome family moments that seem just like the other millions of accounts here on YouTube, that in actuality were carefully orchestrated pieces of a fictitious story that Jen and Sarah were crafting, a story that would only be exposed when it was already too late. I want to give a huge shout out to my gold tier and god tier patrons: Alexander Duran, America's Grumpy Uncle, Bazoo42, Biznacker, Bray, Karen S, Charles Roble, Daniel Binge, Dark GJ, Donovan Aaron, Emmanuel Cadena, Game Gamer, IH Max, Minecrafty Ways, Nathan Backus, Phoenix Morgan, Sam Lutfi, Seralis, Scar77, Skelly, Sub to Micro O, Unblended Korchnoi, Winged Sun Comics, Zinsu Sensei, and Trucky Doggo.
The internet's unknown predator. Well, what? I'm right here. sorry. Open up my mic. Okay. So I've been recording these sites. I know people don't care about them. I don't think why people care. As a little tiny kid, I was so interested in things like power lines and fire hydrants. And now I've come to discover that I have an interest in infrastructure. However, if over my years I have found that these towers, they were blue, or not blue, red and white, giant square towers. Sometimes looking up, they spanned up to 2 to 300 feet up in the air, about roughly 65 to 100 meters tall, with these giant horns on them. Now I've discovered what they're called. They're called long line towers. Microwave network. They were built back in the Cold War to ensure that if the United States were to get nuked, that the United States government would have top tier, unnotched quality of communications. Well, back in the 1990s when we discovered the fiber optic, this was devastating to the entire system. Within a few years, the entire system was shut down, sold, and dismantled. Some of it. Most towers I've observed have been stripped. Some have been stripped, some completely destroyed, abandoned, well, and some rarely even auctioned. Yes. So, I need to go bathroom. I'll be right back. I lost my license. Now I don't drive. My Maserati does 185. I lost my I lost my license. Now I don't drive. Do 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 do. Life's been good for me so far. Don't. I don't.
Does the thought of you or a loved one facing bath time cause anxiety?
You have to take your clothes off.
Dude, this guy's ending quote. He only has 1.4 million
April
subs.
11th, 2021. A young child's phone lights up with a notification from his TikTok account. His heart races as up until this point, engagement on his page had been practically non-existent. And so, excitedly, he unlocks his screen before quickly realizing that this reply was something strange. As rather than being a comment in response to his video, it was instead a challenge directed at him. It read, "Dare you to ask your parents if you can get a bath fully clothed in your shoes and socks, and see what they say." The child was no more than 12 years old, and not wanting to let his new fan down, he decided to accept the dare, approaching his mother and asking to take a bath in his clothes, to which his mother responds with a sharp no.
No.
As inconsequential as it may seem, this one comment is merely our first encounter with one of the more unusual internet mysteries in recent memory, as the account behind it has quietly become one of TikTok's strangest, leaving a trail of concerning videos and comments in its wake. And just as I began to scratch its surface, I quickly realized that this was a rabbit hole far deeper than I'd ever planned on diving down. This is the disturbing story of Howard the Duck 4.
Howard the Duck?
And he is going to get in the shower.
Before we dive down this rabbit hole, I want to first thank today's sponsor, Current. For me, banking has always been an overly complicated and stressful thing to deal with. But Current has come along and basically streamlined everything in a way that has brought banking into the future.
TikTok is the new social video app making it some serious waves.
Hello there. How are you? Hope you're all well. And hope you're all keeping fine.
It started back in the summer of 2020 with this video, an inconspicuous upload by an older user named Howard the Duck 4. His real identity wasn't known, for the main reason that no one really cared enough to find out. He never had any significance on the site, with most of his uploads going by without so much as a second glance, or even a first glance for that matter. And given the quality of his videos, it's not hard to understand why, as the man, who I'll now be referring to simply as Howard, just comes across as a clueless grandpa, unsure of how TikTok actually works. However, as lackluster as this inaugural video seems, there is one unusual moment at the end, when Howard, out of the blue, mentions,
"I love to do things, like swimming, fully clothed."
To a fleeting viewer, the mention of him liking to swim fully clothed would likely be seen as some kind of bizarre joke, but if you stuck around his page any longer, you'd soon notice a pattern to his posting.
Hello everybody. If I get 50 likes, then I will get a bath fully clothed. Hello. I'm about to get in the bath fully clothed.
Weird. For TikTok standards.
Across Howard's page that features just a select few uploads, over and over again, we see the mention of swimming, bathing, and showering in clothing, and we even get to see Howard actually do it for himself, as he's seen here soaking in the tub with a big smile on his face. For whatever reason, Howard appeared to love being in that bathtub with his clothes on, and he seemed completely infatuated with the idea of wet clothing, which to some might have been interpreted as a joke or a bit. But for me and others across the web, it stands out as something
Like a fetish.
potentially a bit more perverse. A fetish known as wet look. In simple terms, wet look is the sexual fetishization of wet clothing, whether it be
Okay.
the feeling of it on you or the look of it on someone else. And this is surprisingly a really common thing, as a simple search on YouTube will yield countless results, with viewership often in the tens of thousands. with many of these uploads being very reminiscent to the videos you would see across Howard's page. And just based off of the small sample size we have through Howard's channel, it seems possible that this could be something he might also partake in. As after all, why else would he be doing this and discussing it so often, while clearly enjoying the actual process of soaking in his clothes? With the information provided thus far, it's impossible to prove one way or another.
I know it might be
whether this is
judge-worthy, but this
actually
guy is kind of a
something
weirdo.
sexual for Howard, but it at least seems like a possibility. And even if this was some kind of fetish for him, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? Well, this is where things start to take an odd turn, as around the same time that Howard had been making these videos, an obscure clip would emerge from a similarly unknown creator.
Don't mind me. I don't want to do anything, but we're going to try something. Do you want to do an activity? Okay, get on shoes, socks, pants. Let me know when you're ready.
With children, come on.
Do you want to get in? Yes. Okay, get in. Get in, get in, get in, get in.
The video shows a mother excitedly taking part in a challenge, where her son enters the bath with all of his clothes on. And what transpires next seems to be a goofy video done in good fun, but it gets a bit stranger when it's revealed that the one proposing this dare was Howard, with his comment reading,
This is
"I've
creepy.
got an idea for you to do where your son is concerned if you're willing to take part in an experiment with him," before going on to explain that this dare was for the young boy to get into the bath fully clothed. It's an odd video, and to make it all the more concerning, it wasn't the only one.
So Brody was dared to take a shower fully clothed. You can see
This is way more creepy when you think about that he, like, Howard is the actual dude behind this BS.
Is it cold?
Oh,
That feels weird. I bet it does fully clothed.
That very same day, another clip would go live showing a young boy entering the shower with all of his clothes on. And again, this was done in response to a challenge issued by Howard. And these videos were just the tip of the iceberg, as in the days, months, and now year following these videos, other users across the site would report seeing hundreds and hundreds of Howard's comments littered all across TikTok, daring people to participate in his new game. It was all just so bizarre, and it became even more so as time went on, as Howard's comments began to grow increasingly demanding and manipulative, which leads us all the way back to the scenario mentioned at the opening of this video, where a young child had received a similar comment from Howard. This was in fact a real encounter, which led to the child recording himself asking his mother to participate, before she eventually told him no.
Can I take a bath with my clothes on, with my shoes and my socks?
But the most damning
No.
part of the interaction came within the comments
Respect
of
to
this
the mother.
video, where Howard actually responded by saying, "Love it, what did she say?" The kid then comments back with, "No, lol." Twice now, Howard had
This
gotten his
dude is
answer,
extremely
first
sus.
from the video, and now from this comment straight from the child himself. However, Howard didn't leave it at that, as he then pushes back by saying, "Does that mean yes or no?" Again, this already answered question went without a reply, prompting yet another response by Howard, where this time he says, "If she had said yes, what would you have done? Would you have gotten in the bath fully clothed, in your shoes and socks?" The whole exchange comes across as almost desperate on Howard's part, as he seems incredibly pushy with a child who was no more than 12 years old. And his last comment makes it seem as if he's fantasizing about this, and the idea of the kid following through with his dare. Plus, even after receiving a firm answer on multiple occasions, he never gave it a rest. In fact, a full month later, Howard came back to the young boy's page once again and asked him to participate, only this time, Howard asked him to do it without his mother's permission. It all felt
That's
very
just
manipulative.
that is
This was a
extremely
theme
manipulative.
throughout most of the comments he left, as he never took no for an answer, and he seemed almost obsessed with having people do this challenge of his. And that wasn't the only concerning similarity across his many replies. If you haven't noticed already, Howard seemed to have a targeted demographic for his challenge, with that being children. As out of all the comments he would leave, they were exclusively left on accounts run by or featuring minors. He never asked a single adult
Pedophile.
to do it, as he always zeroed in on children specifically, and children only. And to get even more specific, he only ever asked little boys. Which
Yep,
brings us
he
to
is a pedophile.
one burning question. Why?
This story begins with a piece of trash and ends with sustainable aviation fuel. But this isn't a story about throwing
Biofuel, we get it.
He's all wet. Mr. Mueller gave us clothes.
Howard's TikTok activity is something truly peculiar, as it certainly raises a number of red flags. As across his page we see
This guy looks like he can't go within 50 feet of a middle school. Scratch it, 500.
And now he just so happens to have started this challenge that is basically providing him with wet look content. And to make it all stranger, he's supposedly trying to start this new challenge, this new trend, yet he only ever asks underage boys to take part in this. And when he does ask, he comes across as desperate to receive these videos, going as far as to use means of manipulation. Piecing it all together, it becomes more and more clear that something truly sinister is happening here, as it appears as though Howard has made up this fake challenge to take advantage of kids and to provide him with erotic content coming from minors, all while doing so in a discreet way, with the challenge proving to be the perfect cover-up, as it makes it so inconspicuous that even the parents of these kids are willingly allowing it to happen and filming it themselves.
This was just for there.
Completely unaware that these videos just so happen to line up with Howard's likely fetish. And the fact that he only ever seeks this content from little boys hints at a clear preference, and almost single-handedly discredits the idea that this is really just some innocent challenge. As remember, there are said to be hundreds and hundreds of these comments out there, as he obsessively comments day in and day out, and not a single one has been found on an adult's page, or even a young girl's page. And if you think the idea of predators creating fake challenges to obtain fetish content sounds far-fetched, well, this would actually be far from the first time something like this has happened. Back in the older days of YouTube, there were countless cases where predators would do the same thing. They would find unknown channels run by kids and proceed to ask them to do sexual things, all under the guise of these fake
Yeah, the moment I see some of that bullshit happening on this channel, you're immediately getting reported.
But at the end of the day, they all serve the same purpose.
Like, if someone actually says for me to do something like that, expect me to report it to the authorities, because I ain't dealing with that bullshit. I don't deal with scumbags. I don't deal with asshats.
Great fetish material for those promoting the challenge. It's the perfect cover-up and the perfect incentivizer to make kids take part in this.
Sadly, it is.
You would be hard-pressed to find a child who would recognize this as a fetish, or even an adult for that matter. And with all this being said, I'm left to firmly believe that Howard does in fact have malicious intent with these comments, and this challenge of his seems to be strictly done for his own sexual gain. The red flags are just too glaring. But identifying this man's predatory behavior is only half the battle. We still don't have undisputed proof
Or his
that this
identity.
is a fetish for him.
Don't know where he lives,
Plus,
don't know where he
we still don't even know
operates.
who this man even is. And to make matters more difficult, this is where his trip
The only thing we know is that he's a white male.
essentially ends. As the Howard the Duck
White male looks like he's in his
is practically
50s.
void of any personal information that could be used to track him down, leading us straight to a dead end.
Which stinks.
Or
Dead.
so I thought.
Wait.
Faced with a lack of answers coming from TikTok, I decided to see what more I could find on this wet clothes fetish here on YouTube. And although many results were totally fine and happening between consenting adults, I was shocked to see that Howard wasn't the only one who had his sights set on minors. My first search revealed hundreds and even thousands of videos of young kids bathing, swimming, and showering in their clothes, many of which were placed in playlists that were clearly meant to be viewed for sexual pleasure.
That is so screwed up, man. Why do people have this mindset?
Most, if not all, of these videos seem to have come from challenges, and challenges that I had never heard of, and that don't seem to actually be real. For example, the cold shower challenge and the jumping into shower fully clothed challenge.
The cold shower challenge?
And essentially every single one of these videos had been created due to dares left within their comments, the same way that Howard has been doing on TikTok, making it clear to me that Howard is not the only one with this specific predatory fetish. And he's not the only one trying to exploit children across
It's weird when there's a
the
freaking group
world
of
to make
people,
this
man.
content. The scope of it all is honestly surreal, as some of these videos have tens and thousands of views, and they just seem to go on and on for forever, with hundreds of thousands of results, the majority of which are currently being viewed sexually. This whole rabbit hole of fake challenges across YouTube is something that I'm going to cover more in depth in an upcoming video. But it's important to note that in recent years, YouTube has removed comments on all videos made by children, which thankfully has drastically reduced the spread of these fake challenges on YouTube. Meaning that most of these
They make it where like I can. I hate when I have to ask me if the content is made for kids. I have to answer no, and I'm scared that it won't get promoted to more people.
That I just so happened to stumble upon that made me stop dead in my tracks.
Mom, can I go back with my clothes on, with my shoes and my socks?
It was the video provoked by Howard, the very start
Jerry.
of this whole rabbit hole. Only this time, rather than being on TikTok, the clip had been re-uploaded to a YouTube channel called Kids Swimming Fully Clothed. And this wasn't the only
29 subs. I'm so glad I have more subs than this asshat. I actually feel proud right now.
Easily be traced back to Howard, as in each of the videos you can see Howard's comments plastered at the top, proposing his now infamous dare. Out of these 7 uploads to be featured on this channel, every single one has been made in response to Howard's comments, and all of these re-uploads came very soon after the actual videos were posted. Which, given the obscurity of these videos and Howard in general, he was most likely the only one who would have been monitoring them. Which leads me to believe that this is in fact his channel, and he's using it to store and share his fetish videos. Or in other words, he's essentially created his own fetish page right here on YouTube by using content.
He's basically made a separate hub, if you know what I mean.
Just soliciting these videos for himself. These comments and these dares were clearly part of a larger plan to distribute this material across the web.
What a weird ass idiot.
Sick obsession. And despite the fake challenge problem having been seemingly solved on YouTube, thanks to the removal of comments, Howard has actually found a way around it, as he's using TikTok to do his dirty work, and YouTube to share his prizes. Which shows us that Howard's reach extends far past that of just TikTok. But how far past was something that I never could have seen coming.
Break free. I want to break free. Ready to break free on your best vacation ever?
Armed with the knowledge that Howard wasn't solely on one platform, I began searching to see where else I could find him across the web. And as a shot in the dark, I decided to search up things like swimming fully clothed, and swimming with clothes on and shoes and socks, which eventually led me to a Twitter account started all the way back in 2012 that had been discussing this very fetish, with the username being Howard the Duck 6. There, this user would tweet things like, "I love to go swimming fully clothed, especially during summer months. Dare you to tell your kids to get a bath or shower fully clothed in their shoes and socks tonight. See what happens." And money-saving idea for the washing if you have kids. Once a week, get
That's
them
not
to
really
have
how
a
it works,
bath fully
idiot.
clothed. It washes them and their clothes.
Yeah.
Tweets go on from
Nah,
there in
that
a
doesn't work
similar
like that.
vein. Which, given the username and the obvious interest in kids swimming with their clothes on, it's apparent that this page is also run by Howard. But this was nowhere near the end of his trail, as I soon started discovering more and more accounts run by Howard from every single direction I looked, many of which going by similar usernames, and all of which discussing wet clothes on children. 8 years ago on Answers.com, an account belonging to Howard asked, "Would you ever teach your kids to swim fully clothed with their shoes and socks on? Or have you ever learned your kids to swim fully clothed with their shoes and socks on?" In another instance, he turned up on a website called swimmingforum.com, again asking if anyone would let their kids swim fully clothed. And it went on from there, as he had posted about the topic on Quora, as well as made numerous polls on MrPoll.com, where he posed questions relating
This
to
guy is
young
so damn
kids
weird.
and, of course, swimming with their clothes on. I even found numerous of Howard's banned accounts on a few separate sites, like Hub Pages for example, where he had been permanently banned for incessantly posting about swimming children. The magnitude of his online footprint is unlike anything I have ever seen, as his postings date back well before 2010, reach all the way up until present day, and he's on virtually every single website I could ever think to check, and on others that I have never even heard of before. And through all of his years of posting online and through all of his different accounts, he only ever posted about kids swimming in their clothes.
This
It's
guy
almost
is
as if
top
the
notch
thought
weird.
of it consumes his life, and every spare moment he has is spent fantasizing about it. He's even started multiple Facebook groups to share his
Oh my
interest in the
god.
topic, with one being called People Who Bathe Fully Clothed Weekly Meeting, and Kids Who Would Like to or Who Can Swim Fully Clothed. Howard is quite literally in every corner of the internet talking about this and seeking this content out, as it seems that as time has gone on, he's grown smarter and smarter about how to solicit these videos for himself, as what once started as random posting across the web has now turned into the targeted exploitation of children in a practically foolproof way. But luckily for us, with an online trail this massive, Howard was bound to slip up at one point.
I dare you to get a bath.
Yes, I'm asking you, Howard.
As it turns out, it seems that Howard wasn't even trying that hard to keep his identity a secret, as on his Twitter page discussed previously, he links to a GoFundMe site where he was trying to raise
Oh
money
my
for a
god, how much
project
might he
he
raise?
so
Please.
dearly believed in. The page read, "I am doing a swim fully clothed for Martin House Hospice for children and young people, because to help in the running of the hospice, please do give as much as you can. Every penny really does help. Thank you."
Does. Oh my god. Does. He said does, but he spelled it as in dose.
Though it seemed pretty
D-O-S-E.
obvious that this was a
What a
failed
shit.
attempt by Howard to try and witness his fetish up close and personal by holding an event encouraging kids to come and swim fully clothed. But within this listing lies one key mistake, as Howard had used his real name, likely something that would have been required if he wanted to receive any of the funds. And surprisingly, his name actually did turn out to be Howard Newton to be exact. And after a few quick searches and matching his photos and videos, it's clear that Howard the Duck 4 is in fact Howard
That's
Newton,
him.
a middle-aged man living in West Yorkshire, England. And the discovery of Howard's true identity managed to prove even more important than I ever could have imagined, as throughout this video, though it seemed obvious that Howard did in fact have a wet look fetish, I couldn't find any undeniable proof of it until I found his personal Facebook page.
Oh boy.
There, I discovered that he was following accounts like Wet Look, Vicky's Mud Paradise, and Zenny's Wet Look, among many others. which, if you haven't guessed, are all clear-cut, wet-look fetish pages, all of which were heavily sexualized, and followed closely by Howard.
I know it was
Which
censored, but
confirms
still.
without a shadow of a doubt,
Like
this was
sex.
always something sexual for Howard.
Sex.
Along with this, discovering Howard's identity also showed me that the Howard the Duck 4 account wasn't even his only page on TikTok, as he has actively been posting, as well as continuing.
I don't know. I'm not a TikToker. I don't like TikTok, but I've heard somewhere where you can only have one page. I think I heard that from someone discussing vegan teaching.
This is the backup account in case videos get banned on my other account.
On this page, Howard explains that he is using it as a backup account should his main channel get banned, which that alone shows us that Howard is aware that his predatory behavior, at the very least, goes against terms of service, and it heavily implies that he is well aware what he's doing is wrong.
It is.
And though his behavior under Howard the Duck 4 seemed somewhat calculated and clearly thought unhinged, as he has ramped up his obsessive commenting even more, and he's now started making videos in response to those in his replies, where he verbally asks these young boys to participate in his challenges.
I dare you to get a bath full of clothes and do a shuffle with your wet clothes on. I dare you to get a bath full of clothes and then do a shuffle in your wet clothes.
And even when he's getting called out by some of these kids, he just continues to ask shamelessly. But by far the most troubling discovery to come from his new TikTok account takes us yet again to the opening of this video, and that same child who Howard had approached all the way back in April of 2021. It was noted earlier that Howard had returned to the young boy's page a whole month later after his initial offer was declined. But as it turns out, he didn't even stop there, as he actually returned to the young boy's page yet again, this time a full 6 months later, where he continued begging for this kid's participation, this time doing so under the more recent Newton Howard account, which just further showcases his disturbing persistence and how deep his predatory obsession truly is. And by this point, I had thought I'd seen it all, or at least the worst that this rabbit hole had to offer. But just as I had finished this video up, I made yet another disturbing discovery, and one that brings this whole case full circle. While scrolling through Howard's Facebook page one final time, I realized that he had been following another suspicious group, and upon sifting through its contents, I found that Howard was the only one to have posted on it, and was its original creator, with the group's name being Dare to Do for YouTube Video. There, Howard would follow a similar formula to his TikTok page by daring users to do his challenge, with the only difference being that he would ask them to upload the footage directly to YouTube. And when they would do so, he would link the videos back within the group as a way of archiving them and encouraging others to participate, with these postings going all the way back to 2014. And it didn't stop there, as I found another page that was also run by Howard, called Bath Challenge Facebook.
He has shit grammar.
He did the same exact thing, only there he was and is far more active, as the group has hundreds of posts, all showing kids participating in these dares, with the most recent posts being the TikTok videos that he had obtained earlier this year. Between these two groups were countless proposed dares and even more videos, with the most concerning part being that Howard seems to have taken credit for them. And though I haven't found a way to prove it yet for sure, it seems likely that many, if not all of these hundreds of YouTube videos were solicited by Howard himself. This didn't start for him on TikTok. He was one of the ones running these fake challenge operations on YouTube, way back in the early days. And when the comment sections got disabled, and it became much harder to solicit these videos through YouTube, Howard simply switched platforms to continue his predatory ways. It's just such a disturbing revelation, as it's very likely that many of the videos
This guy is a really good investigator.
exploring the YouTube side of this, simply to understand the history of fake internet challenges, may have actually been solicited by the very predator I was hunting. This is truly one of the most bizarre cases that I've ever worked
Nick
on.
Crowley is like
Though
one of the
it's
best internet investigators ever, besides Sunny V2.
It's unclear what will happen to Howard from this point on.
Hopefully he gets banned. This guy's such a weird ass dude.
I have suspicions that there is some sort of mental illness involved here. However,
He can't be mentally okay. His grammar is complete shit. It's worse than mine, and I'm ass at grammar.
He's used this content to start a fetish page on YouTube leads me to believe that he is aware enough to understand what he's doing. Plus, not to mention his clear understanding.
Yo, what's up?
What he's doing is wrong and would likely lead to him getting banned. And because of this, I forwarded all of this information and more to law enforcement in this area. Though I honestly have my doubts that they will actually do anything. I mean, this whole thing is just so obscure. And though Howard is clearly a predator,
what a weird dude. Yeah, this dude should not be allowed to walk in public. Let's just be honest about that.
so I'd imagine that this would be a hard
My opinion, he's not as worse as other people, but still, he's screwed up.
with practically all of these fake challenges across the web, given the fact that they are typically centered around an obscure fetish, plus the lack of any
Thanks. This is way better than the buildings I've built even 2 years ago. Here's how I built. Like, I used to build like this. I would like, this is a small building. Like if I would build like this, I'd put only concrete and glass. Now I've started to include things. Here's my new generation of buildings. More 3D. I've added more of a 3D touch to it. I've tried to include blocks, and I've tried to match a palette. For example, this kind of has a modernized look. So I've been experimenting with palettes and things. This is the Abtarian government complex. This building is going to reach up, and it's going to go up to here, and it's going to connect to this with a glass platform. And that's going to be a miniature atrium up there, and then it's going to go up and end. If you actually don't know, if you actually look right here, there's TAA. You can actually see the TAA logo or TAA letters on this building. All these buildings here, even though it's lazy, I actually duplicated them. Or you actually look, this floor is exactly the same as the other. Oh. Just as you thought that was wild. Each individual building can be shut down. Where's the switch for this one? Is it right out in the front? Oh, here it is. 5, PS5. Each building can be shut off like that. It's a good thing I'm on a PS5 because a PS4 would die here. All the lights slowly flicker on. I had way more buildings in my other country until I kind of switched over to this one because this one is a big country. It's called Abtarian, by the way. It's like a custom country. Oh. I think the PDAs are starting to work here. This is called a PDA, or those two things on top. That right there is called a PDA, or a perimeter the perimeter defense arc. The perimeter defense arc shoots invisible waves of electricity to zap and kill any monster designated. These two have been designated to kill phantoms, and each phantom that comes close to my tower is killed with a zap, and you could probably hear it. Like if I just summon a phantom. Oops. Like. Yeah, it just zaps him out of midair and it kills him instantly. It does 25 damage per hit, and it deals 2 hits per second. Hits per second. After I built this complex, I'm thinking about expanding here. I'm actually gonna be like, this city's gonna be cool. Parking lots are gonna have solar panels above them. Almost all Oh, don't apologize, dude. It's okay. I feel bad for people that are like, oh, I'm sorry. No, your life. It's your life. I don't want to control you. I don't want to feel like a pest. Oh, thank you. My Christmas wish is about 200 subs. Channel's been on for about 3 years now. Like 3 and almost the third years. I don't know. Happy October. Happy spooky season. My allergies are killing me. Allergies kill me so bad. I almost just want a hermetically sealed suit. Oops. Bye. Have a good day, dude. Okay. Pants keep like, encroaching up on my stomach, man. And I don't know why. He's... The disappearance of Timothy Faison? Dude, is this the one lady that just... I think I've heard about this. I've heard about this. Like, the lady just literally dropped off the radar, completely disappeared, no trace, if I'm not wrong.
Hearing the way that they talk about it, it's clear to me that Timothy was a good kid. A good kid with a sick mother.
Like, yeah, the hotel video of that one lady going down, and she walks out, and that's it. Like she's gone. She never showed up on public radar.
Take her own life, but was ultimately unsuccessful. It wasn't an easy life for her, but in the early 2000s, a child who would instantly become the light of Amy's life. Amy's heart was with Timothy. She even added an extra M to his name to, quote, make him more special. The bond the two shared was seemingly very strong.
Oh.
But elsewhere in her life, her marriage with Jim was becoming anything. The relationship began to cool down and take a turn for the worse. The fighting had got to the point where Amy became sure that her fourth divorce was imminent. But see, this is where the problem arose for Amy. Given her long track record with failing relationships and her history with mental illness, it wouldn't take an expert to realize that Amy was likely not going to get custody of the then 6-year-old Timothy, meaning that her true source of happiness, the child she held and loved so dearly, would be taken from her. A little before 8 a.m. on May 11, 2011, Jim dropped Timothy off at school and watched as he ran towards his kindergarten teacher.
Oh. I actually went to school before kindergarten once.
Not knowing that this would be the last time he'd ever see his son. When he came to pick Timothy up at the end of the day, he was told that he had already left. Just 30 minutes upon arriving at school, Amy came to pick Timothy.
Oh, not the hotel, it's the school.
There was a family emergency and that Timmy had to leave quickly. Jim knew nothing about it because there was no family emergency.
Oh.
Amy had lied. He tried calling her.
Little witch.
The phone went straight to voicemail. She had seemingly dropped off of the map, leaving Jim and others to wonder where they had gone. Jim was worried and obviously confused, but ultimately he trusted Amy enough to know that she wasn't going to hurt the son that she loved so much. As friends and family wondered and worried about the now missing girl, the two had driven to Illinois and were seemingly on an innocent, spur-of-the-moment vacation. Over the next few days, Amy took Timothy on a trip.
They went to my state.
A zoo and a nice resort. 3 locations that were all captured on CCTV footage.
I doubt it.
Along the way, Amy had bought Timothy.
Where the hell is there?
And honestly, the whole situation is like,
Dude, how'd you have fun in my state? My state's complete ass, bruh.
Getting toys, going to a water park. I mean, from a distance, it seemed like Timothy was a lucky kid. At one point, the pair traveled to Wisconsin, where Amy had even called Jim
The Dells?
and told him that Timothy was safe. She also added that Timothy was hers and only hers. After this, she called her own mother.
She's possessive.
Timothy was in fact safe. During this call, Timothy could be heard in the background on multiple occasions, including once when he had complained about being hungry. Say no. The strangest detail to come from these calls was the fact that she had never tried to call her own husband, but yet she called his brother. Things were clearly off, and they were only going to get more confusing. At roughly 10 a.m., the pair checked out of their hotel in Wisconsin on May 13th. While in the lobby, CCTV
I was right.
footage captured the two at the front desk. And it's frustrating to watch. Such a young kid with full trust in his mother, likely not thinking anything of the situation that they were in. Seeing this footage is tough.
Wait a second.
Because the mother knew what was soon to
Wait a
happen.
second. That's the Kalahari Resort. I know that. That's the Kalahari. I went there this summer. Okay, here's what this is. What's it called? That, I think the left of the screen should be north, okay? So here's how it works. So, okay, actually I'm going to build it. I'm not going to build it completely, okay? So like say that counter, let's say the mom's right here, and this is the counter. Okay, so like if the parent was right here, right? The parent's right there, and that's the, wait, hold on, sorry. And actually, no, she's right here, right? And that's the counter. How Wisconsin, or how Kalahari is built, is that there's this giant wheel door right here. Like, this giant, like, wheel door right here. And there's doors. And how it works is that around that, like, there's, like, this fountain over there. And I know it, like, the exact same thing. The floor... Actually, let's take a video. Let's go to my video of Kalahari. They said she went to Wisconsin. You know what I did? I bet she did. She took I-39. I know. Because the best way to get from Wisconsin in my area and from Illinois is you take I-39. It's a very good interstate to go to Wisconsin. In fact, look at I-39. It goes straight north. It does not deviate at all. Or barely deviates in that fact. Now where's my video? Let's see. February, March, April, May, June. June 1st. Let's see. Here's a video I took from the elevator. So you can see the floor. The floor here is, the floor here is kind of a dark, grainy, tan here. Now let's go to that video. It looks the exact same. Because, like, I remember going in and checking in. What it looks like is that they were wooden desks with computers looking old, with that rope in the background, and there's light coming from the back. And you can see a rocky appearance right here, and I think that's actually where a small exhibit is actually housed. This is the Kalahari Resort of Wisconsin Dells. And you want to know what? It's really close to I-39. I play the video.
Such a young kid with full trust in his mother.
That is Wisconsin Dells.
Anything of the situation that they were in. Seeing this footage is tough because the mother knew what was soon to happen, but Timothy was innocently clueless. That night, Amy was seen on CCTV footage walking into a Family Dollar store in Winnebago. There she bought paper.
Winnebago. Where is Winnebago? Let's see. How far is Lake Winnebago from Wisconsin Dells? 72 miles. Which is far, but that is doable. She's moving. If my claim is right, like, let's call it, I cannot type with a shit. Lobby. Check-in. Where's check-in? Yeah, so she would be off frame, like roughly right here. Where's the counter desks? Yeah, so like there's these desks, and that's maybe where she was, like right there. There's a line of desks, and let's see the video one more time. Let's see that video. You can almost see a Rocky, yeah, like another Rocky appearance. This lady, if
A young kid with full trust in his mother, likely not thinking anything of the situation
like
they were in. Seeing this footage is tough, because the mother knew, but it wouldn't be the last. She then went to purchase food from another store in Winnebago, again without the company of Timothy. She went unseen by cameras for a few hours after.
which actually puts more evidence. If the Kalahari is about 70 miles away from there, what I just searched up, and if my data is correct, I can theorize it or hypothesize she was running. And actually, it's a little bit up north. Maybe she was trying to go get some food and run away to Canada.
Until eventually she checked into a hotel in Rockford. She booked a room for one.
Hold on. Rockford, Wisconsin. Where is that up? No, I said Wisconsin. Where is Roxon? Rockford. No. Yeah, that or oh, actually, you know what? I forgot. Rockford is very close to. It is literally. Actually, I forgot to mention this. 39 actually stops in Rockford, and Interstate 90 starts. She probably took 39 and got off to 90. And if it is, Rockford, Illinois. Rockford, Illinois is literally just south of the border. She's trying to evade.
Was alone in that hotel room. Amy Pitson died. On the morning of May 14th, 2011, her body was found in her hotel room. Deep gashes marked both of her wrists and her neck. Her
Suicide.
blood revealed that she had also consumed a potentially lethal amount of antihistamines. Whichever killed her first, one thing was obvious. Amy Pitson had committed suicide. And as is usually the case, Amy left behind a note. And in it she said sorry to her loved ones for causing this mess. She also said that Timothy was safe, but she added the chilling statement that he would never be found. Another note was sent to her mother, which echoed the sentiment that Timothy had been taken someplace safe and that he would be cared for years and years. She also added that Timothy says he loves you. The case gained national attention due to its shocking and disturbing nature. People watched in disbelief as they heard the story play out on their televisions. The whole world was now seemingly wondering what happened to Timothy. This was a question that would not be answered anytime soon. Days into the search turned to weeks, then months, then years. Every once in a while, someone would claim to see the young boy in a park or in a restaurant, but none of the claims ever turned out to be substantial. And the case that once had all eyes in America on it had quickly become generally forgotten by the masses as they clung to the next big news story. The hopes of finding Timothy became lower and lower as the years rolled on, and by the time 2019 rolled around, many assumed the case to be hopeless. But not Jim. He believed that his son was in fact out there, and that he was in good hands. He also believed that he would one day be reunited with Timothy, and that the case would finally be solved. Some called him crazy. I would call him patient. And it seemed like his patience was about to pay off.
A
employee at a Cincinnati hospital tells authorities he is Timothy Pitson. That sent police into action back here in Aurora, Illinois.
Jim got a call in early April of 2019 that stated that a young boy claiming to be Timothy had been found. The boy claimed that he had escaped from the hands of 2 kidnappers who held him hostage for over 7 years. Once escaping their grasp, he said he ran and he ran and he ran until eventually being discovered. For a moment, Jim felt bliss. His son had been found. After all these years, his relentless efforts to find Timothy had finally paid off, and the case was solved. DNA tests were administered to the battered and scared child as a precautionary measure to prove that he was telling the truth. The tests quickly came back, and they came back with shocking news. The 14-year-old boy was not Timothy. His name was in fact Brian Reaney, and even more shockingly, he wasn't 14, but rather he was 23 years old.
Oh my
The
god.
23-year-old Reaney was a convicted felon who had lied about his identity
What a
in the past.
dick.
In this case, he had watched a television special on Timothy Pitson and decided to impersonate the kid.
What an
Whatever his
asshole.
twisted motives were for this hoax don't even matter at this point. The blow this must have dealt to Jim must have been unimaginable. Insult to injury almost. Salt on the wound. His life was controlled by this case, and it was finally about to be solved with a happy resolution. But now he had to face the pain of not knowing all over again. This was the last major news from this case.
That
And
poor
to this
kid.
day, Timothy has not been seen or heard from, and the case remains open. As is typically the case with most strange disappearances, a number of theories have been circulating around as to what may have happened to Timothy, and it seems like the most plausible one right now is murder. Upon police examination of Amy's vehicle, they were able to find an unsettling amount of blood throughout her car, blood that belonged to Timothy. This, along with Amy's sporadic actions and unfit mental state, has led many to believe that Amy had in fact murdered her own son. In her suicide note, when she writes that Timothy was safe with people he loved and that he'd never be found, people take this as meaning that Timothy was now in heaven with other loved ones who had passed. Upon further examination of her vehicle, it was determined that the car had been parked in a grassy area, possibly near a stream. Perhaps this suggests that after Timothy had killed Timothy, she dumped his body in the woods, in a spot that she was sure that no one would ever check. This whole theory would also explain why Timothy was inexplicably not with his mother for the majority of her final day. Perhaps she had committed the crime en route to Rockford. This would also explain why Amy had taken Timothy to all these cool places and gotten him all that nice stuff. Perhaps she was making his final days the best of his life. Knowing what we know about this case, I understand why this is the most popular theory. I agree with the notion that this is certainly the most likely theory, and that there is a very good chance that this is exactly what happened. However, once you dig a little deeper, there is still a lot of evidence that casts doubt on the theory itself. For starters, Timothy was Amy's one source of happiness. He was everything to her, and I get that she was depressed, but that doesn't just make you kill the one that you love the most. I mean, depression doesn't just make you a murderer, so why would she kill Timothy? I mean, every murder has a motive, and I
Exactly.
just don't see one in this
Money,
case. And at this point,
love,
she certainly wasn't under the
greed,
influence of everything, because
hate,
she was driving around and
revenge.
walking normally into stores just hours later, so it clearly wasn't done in some kind of drug-induced rage or anything like that. And the fact that she loved him so much makes it
It's
hard
just
to believe that she had just planned this
odd.
murder out and actually went through with it. So is it even really possible that she could have murdered him? Also, as for the blood in her car, this was later revealed to have likely been from one of Timothy's frequent nosebleeds. He had gotten a bad one in the car just weeks before his disappearance, which authorities now believe had caused the blood that they had found in the car. And despite all the police investigations into the hotels that they stayed at and the crime scene where Amy had killed herself, no evidence of murder was ever found. The only piece of true evidence to support this was the fact that Amy had changed her clothes after leaving the hotel where Timothy was last seen. This set of clothes was never seen again. So at the end of the day, we have a really strong theory here, and despite its many flaws, it's still possible that this was in fact what happened. But I certainly can't say with 100% certainty that Amy murdered Timothy, and for that reason, we have to explore some other theories. Buried in the suicide note and forgotten by most was the fact that Amy had mentioned how she didn't want to risk Timothy being hurt by Jim because of her choices. This is something that really jumped out to me because it implies something incredibly dark. First of all, why would she just assume that Jim would hurt Timothy? Perhaps this suggests that Jim was actually abusive towards him, and she feared that taking her life would fill him with even more rage. I mean, she wouldn't just assume Jim would hurt Timothy if he didn't have a history of abuse, right? I mean, that's not just something that you could assume that he would just randomly start doing out of the blue. So perhaps this is why Amy never called Jim, because he might not have been the man that we thought. But digging even deeper, let's look into the second part of her statement. Because of her choices. Sure, this could mean her choice to take her own life and to take Timothy on this random trip. But why would this translate into Timothy being hurt? These were Amy's actions, and there's no way that it could be spun around and blamed on a 6-year-old child. This has led many to believe that there was more to this statement. Some believe that this statement implies that Amy had actually cheated on Jim, and that Timothy was not actually Jim's son. And perhaps she felt that if Jim were to ever find out about the choices she made to cheat on him, that he would hurt the both of them. Or maybe he just wouldn't be able to handle the pain of being lied to. So it's possible that Amy discovered that Timothy was in fact not Jim's child, and that she panicked and caused this whole ordeal. And maybe she ended up taking Timothy to his actual father, who is now raising him in secrecy. I know this one is a bit out there, but there's one thing that really sticks out in my mind when I hear this, and that is this. When Amy and Jim met, Jim was battling Hodgkin's lymphoma. He was luckily able to beat the disease, but not without the help of chemotherapy. But a nasty side effect of this treatment is typically infertilization for men. So when Jim was later able to have a child with Amy, they viewed it as a miracle. But perhaps it wasn't a miracle at all. Perhaps it was someone else's child. So to recap this theory, some believe that Amy had gotten pregnant with Timothy because of another man, and fearful of what Jim might do when he later finds out, she took Timothy away and had him live in secrecy with his real father. And unable to cope with the mess that she created, Amy had taken her own life. Now to me, this is a theory based purely in speculation that is very interesting, but probably not much more than that. It is quite certainly more of a reach than saying that he was just murdered. But at the end of the day, it's still a possibility, and perhaps bits and pieces of it are true. Perhaps none of it is. But with a case this mysterious, all things have to be considered. Now this theory is a bit more vague, but it is a popular one among Timothy's remaining family. They believe that Timothy was given up to a kind family who lives in a remote area, and that are now homeschooling Timothy and hiding him. I mean, after all, 2011 was a high point for underground adoptions, so it's possible that a family illegally adopted him through Amy. But there's also stranger places that some people believe that he might have gone. Some people believe that Timothy was given up to a remote Amish community, and that he is there working and living with a group of people who are now caring for him. Another creepier belief is that Timothy was given up to a cult located in the Wisconsin area near the hotel that the two had stayed at. Now, I couldn't find much information about this supposed cult, but I've heard from a lot of locals that really swear that it is real. Whoever he was given up to, this theory suggests that Timothy is alive and well to this day. And for that reason, I honestly hope that this is the case. I mean, even if he's part of some creepy cult, at least he's alive. And at least there's hope that he can one day be reunited with his father. To this day, neither of the theories discussed have been proven or disproven, and closure seems a long way off for the family of Timothy Pitson. Perhaps in the future, Timothy will return home to his father with a story to tell. But until then, we'll just have to wait for more answers before we can truly solve the disappearance of Timothy Pitson.
That's sad, man. The Diatlov Pass incident. Dude, this is This is a straight up weird story. These guys, spoiler, these guys go in Russia in the 1960s, 70s, I think, and they are going through this mountain pass, and then all of a sudden they lose contact. Like, one dude goes back and they all lose contact, but then when they find the bodies, there's scratch marks, some of them are barefoot, and some of them have radiation on their clothing. This is a weird case.
In the winter months of 1959, a group of 9 young, experienced hikers began their journey into the Ural Mountains of Russia. This wasn't the first.
The mountains that actually separate Asia and Europe.
But tragically, it would be their last. During the trip, the hikers encountered something in the supposedly desolate region that led to the deaths of the entire group. What exactly happened that night is still unknown, but the incident has since become one of the world's greatest mysteries, with the details and evidence being some of the most shocking that I've ever investigated. So to preface how we know so much about this story, cameras and diaries belonging to the group were actually found at the campsite that show the actions and the thoughts of each of the 10 hikers. And because of the cameras found at the campsite, many of the photographs used within this video are going to be actual shots taken by the Diatlov group.
The
story of the Diatlov pass
Diatlov Russian words like always end in ov or something. Is that like a thing?
Each of the members of the 10-man group were certified grade 2 hikers, and the completion of the trip
or
made
ski.
grade 3, which at the time was the most prestigious hiking certificate in the Soviet Union. Because of this, the trip was quite serious, with booze and cigarettes being left behind in order to avoid distraction. The goal was for the hikers to reach the mountain of Orton, and the track that the hikers would be taking was rated at the highest possible difficulty. Still though, the group remained confident that they would be able to complete the journey, as they were properly prepared and properly trained. Their journey started on the 25th of January, as the group began traveling towards the village of Vizhai. Once there, the hikers rested for the night and began their hike on the 27th. But for one of the hikers, bad luck would strike early. Just one day into the hike,
this guy's like the only survivor, right?
Yuri Yudin began to suffer from severe joint pain. Yudin had been plagued by many health problems over the course of his life, and the limitations it placed on him were obviously quite frustrating. But in this case, his untimely health problems may have actually saved his life. With the pain in his joints becoming too much to bear, Yudin decided that he would only slow the hikers down if he stayed. So he said goodbye to his team, and he headed home.
He's the only survivor.
Of the tragedy that was soon to unfold. The departure of Yudin left the group with 9 people, 7 men and 2 women. The leader of the group, Igor Diatlov, was said to be extremely knowledgeable and experienced, and by all accounts, he was a Pass. Severe weather had caused them to lose their bearings and eventually end up on the side of the mountain Kolatsaiko, or as it was better known by the local Mansi tribe, Dead Mountain. It was late at this point, and the weather was anything but stable, so Dyatlov made the questionable decision to pitch the tent and hunker down until sunrise. It's believed that none of the hikers would make it that far. In the midst of their trip, Igor Diatlov had told Yuri Yudin as he was leaving that the group would send a telegram once they had returned back from their journey. Dyatlov believed the trip would likely take 16 days, but a few extra days were possible due to the unpredictable weather of the region. Yudin had waited for the telegram for weeks, but it never came. This caused him to report the group as missing, and by the end of February, a search party was underway. On the 26th of February, a search party was able to locate the tent in which the hikers had spent their final night. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that the tent was cut open from the inside by one of the hikers. With these hikers,
indicating a possible
as
escape.
experienced as they were, they would not have done this unless they were extremely spooked by something. And the condition of the tent shows that the group likely cut the tent open from the inside in order to flee from something.
An escape.
Think about how crazy this is. Something had to scare them so badly and make them want to flee so quickly that they sliced open their only bit of shelter. Not only this, but the hikers had fled their tents so quickly that most were not wearing
Barefoot.
shoes, and none were properly dressed for the negative 30-degree temperature, with some venturing out of the tent in only their underwear. Perhaps even more shockingly, the footsteps of all 9 of the hikers were discovered heading away from the campsite, which revealed something strange. Rather than the footprints being sporadic, as one would expect if they were running away from something, they were instead extremely organized. One by one, the hikers walked single file down the hill in their bare feet and socks with hardly any clothes on, as they slowly began to freeze to death. Between the cut-open tent and the single file walking, it's already very clear that something very unusual had happened that night, but things only got stranger as the bodies began to be discovered.
Step forward to change a life, to save a life, to stop the hurt, to start the healing.
Each and every one of the deaths on the Diatlov pass seemed suspicious. Investigators set out on the
There's rumors that what happened to this, anything from like aliens to the government. I'm not joking.
Alive. The tent was located and the footprints were located. Now all that's left to do was find these extremely experienced hikers. While combing the area around a patch of trees, a member of the search party noticed that there was something brown sticking out of the snow near an old cedar tree. As they approached, they noticed that all of the branches on the lower part of the tree had been broken off, which might have suggested that somebody had possibly tried to climb it. Remains of an old fire were found under the tree as well, and next to this fire was where the first bodies were found. Yuri Doroshenko was the first hiker found. He was lying face down in the snow, wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt and swimming trunks. He was wearing 2 socks with no shoes.
Why are there swimming trunks
Doroshenko
packed?
had a large burn on the right side of his head and on his foot. Along with this, he also had gray fluid coming out of his mouth. His body was covered in scrapes and bruises, and his ears, nose, and lips were covered in blood. It is speculated that these injuries were self-inflicted and done out of agony, as Doroshenko was quite literally being frozen to death. The gray fluid found coming out of Doroshenko's mouth is typically a sign that the body had experienced a strong force to their chest cavity. This perhaps suggests that Doroshenko had possibly fallen from the cedar tree, or that somebody else had pressed on his chest with extreme force. Despite these strange findings, Doroshenko's official cause of death was labeled as hypothermia, and the detail of the gray fluid found in his mouth never made the initial report. 23-year-old Yuri Krivonashenko was found lying next to Doroshenko under the cedar tree. He was found wearing a long-sleeved shirt and a single sock. His body was heavily bruised with multiple cuts as well. Burns were found on his foot and up his legs, as well as on both of his hands. Inside of his mouth, a chunk of his own knuckle was found, which may have been done while Krivonashenko was biting his knuckle in order to either stay conscious or to stop himself from crying. Later investigation revealed that both of the first 2 bodies were moved after death. What may have happened in this situation was that other members of the group found the 2 dead and put their bodies in an orderly manner out of respect. Other members of the group may have took the men's clothing to divide up amongst themselves in a desperate attempt to stay warm. The next body to be found was that of Igor Diatlov, the leader of the group. Diatlov was found face up with both of his fists clenched,
Diatlov.
and his body had also been clearly manipulated after his death. Diatlov had abrasions and bruises on both of his ankles, as well as cuts and bruises on his face. He was missing an incisor in his jaw, and the coroner reported that these injuries were consistent with that of those caused by a fistfight. His official death was hypothermia. Zinaida Kolomogorova was the first of the women to be found. She was found better dressed than the others, but one of the sweaters she was wearing had part of its right sleeve torn off. She had abrasions on both of her hands and bruises on her face. Another long bruise was found at the side of her body, which apparently showed consistency to a hit from a baton. These injuries show a potential sign of struggle, and her official cause of death was labeled as hypothermia due to a violent accident. Both Kolmogorova and Diatlov were likely trying to make their way back to the tent when they both perished. It wouldn't be for another week that the next body was found. 23-year-old Rustam Slobodan was found on March 5th, lying face down and covered in snow. He had internal bleeding in both of his temples and a large fracture on his skull. Whatever caused the fracture and hemorrhaging is unclear, but medical experts concluded that Slobodan likely survived the injury for up to an hour after it had happened. It is theorized that Slobodan became extremely disoriented and dizzy after suffering these injuries and collapsed on the ground. Still conscious and awake, Slobodan quickly died of hypothermia. His body too showed signs that it had been moved post-mortem. Months would go by until a member of the Mansi tribe discovered a den created by the surviving hikers. This den was a last-ditch effort for the remaining 4 to survive the frigid cold, but ultimately, it was unsuccessful. Ludmila Dubinina was found with her body draped over a natural ledge, with running water flowing directly next to her body. The tissue around her lips and her mouth were missing, exposing her teeth and her upper jaw. Soft tissue was also missing in other parts of her face, revealing her cheekbone in one area. 10 of her ribs were broken, and massive hemorrhaging had occurred in her heart. Both of her eye sockets were empty, meaning that both of her eyes had been removed.
That is so weird.
On her head that was missing, however. Dubinina's tongue had been removed, and it was nowhere to be found.
What the hell?
In the stomach suggests that she was alive when this occurred. Her cause of death was hemorrhaging into the right atrium of the heart, making her one of the only deaths to officially be ruled as something other than hypothermia. Semyon Zolotorov, the oldest member of the group, was found slightly more prepared for the elements than the others. He had 3 pairs of pants on, and he wore a long jacket over his sweater, with 2 hats, a scarf, and boots. Despite him having at least some preparation for the cold, he too perished along with the others. Much like Dubinina, Zolotoryov had mysteriously suffered injuries to his chest, resulting in 5 broken ribs and a flailed chest. He was missing tissue along his right eyebrow, which revealed his exposed skull bone. He also had a deep gash in the back of his head, which too revealed blood. Zolotoryov was also found without eyes. His cause of death was quickly ruled hypothermia, despite the strange unexplained injuries that he had suffered. Both Zolotoryov and Dubinina had suffered their chest injuries whilst they were still alive. Medical experts concluded that their injuries were caused by a large force and could not have been caused by another human. Their internal injuries were similar to something you would see from a car accident, but despite this, neither had any bruising or marks where the force would have hit. This point alone continues to baffle researchers and remains unexplained how it could even be possible. Alexander Koletov was found near the den, along with the others. Though not ideal, his clothing was better than the majority of his companions. However, there were rips and tears found on his jacket and on his pants. Along with these rips, burn marks were found on his jacket and socks. Kolevatov was missing both of his eyebrows, and bone could be seen where they once were. His nose was broken, and his neck was deformed, meaning that it was likely snapped. A gash was also found behind his right ear. Despite the clear and obvious signs of a major struggle, the autopsy was left vague and concluded that he too had died from hypothermia. The vagueness of the autopsy was fairly consistent with the remaining victims found in May of that year. Little explanation was given to any of their injuries, and the autopsies were found to be very misleading. Nikolai Brignoli was similar to Zolotoryov in the fact that both were somewhat prepared for the outdoor elements. It has long since been believed that Brignoli and Zolotoryov were outside of the tent at the time that the others fled, which would explain why they were already prepared for the cold. Brignoli was found with bruising on his lips and on the lower left side of his face. he had bled internally on his lower right forearm. Along with this, his skull was fractured and cracked all over the left side of his head. These fractures would have had to have been caused by an extremely powerful force, but no damage was done to the soft tissue on the top of the fracture, meaning that again, another human could not have inflicted these injuries. Upon suffering this injury, Brignoli would likely have been in an unconscious state and would have died no more than 3 hours later. His death, too, was officially blamed by a powerful force that could not have been caused by a human. Each and every one of the deaths on the Diatlov Pass seemed suspicious. All of the hikers had bruising and cuts on their bodies, specifically on their faces, and most had other shocking and disturbing injuries that were left unexplained. But one of the more shocking things revealed in this case has yet to be discussed in this video. It is believed that the last 4 hikers had taken clothes from some of the corpses once they had passed away in a desperate attempt to survive the freezing cold. So when the final 4 bodies were found, they were all wearing clothes from the victims who died before them. It was discovered that on these clothes, trace amounts of radiation were detected.
Yeah.
Adding to that, radiation was also detected in the entire area of the Diatlov Pass at the time. It is believed that there is no natural way that this radiation could have been found.
They were some of them were nuclear physicists, right?
But an explanation as to how it got there has never been offered. Looking at these deaths as a whole, no part of the situation seems to make any sense. From the ripping open of the tent, to the single file walk down the mountain, to the horrific injuries, and finally the radiation, everything just seems out of whack, which is why this case has become one of the most mysterious of all time. And due to its popularity and widespread appeal, thousands of theories have been put forth as to what may have caused all of this. Here are some of the more popular ones.
The theories.
One of the earliest theories to come out of this event was the idea that the local Mansi tribe had killed the hikers. As I mentioned earlier, a storm had caused the hikers to wander off course and end up on what is now known as Death Mountain. The mountain was home to the Mansi people, and it was theorized that they attacked the hikers when they ventured onto their land. One piece of evidence to support this was the fact that a Mansi chum was found just a few hundred meters away from the campsite. Supposedly, a chum was a symbolic structure that was created at the time of a sacrifice. Could the Mansi people have sacrificed the hikers or killed them for stepping onto their land? It could be somewhat possible. And taking a look at the pictures that the Diatlov group had taken prior to their death, it is clear that they were stepping on the land of the secluded tribe. The tribe isn't always welcoming to visitors, so perhaps this led to a conflict. What could also support this theory was the fact that the Mansi people knew this land better than anyone else in the world. Perhaps they could have covered up their tracks and staged the murders in such a strange way that they knew it would never be solved. Now this theory is so intriguing to me because it would answer why the hikers fled their tents so quickly. Perhaps they realized they were about to be attacked and they tried to escape from the tribe. Also, it would explain why they walked single file down the hill, because maybe they were being led there and told to do so. Ultimately, the theory for the Mansi people having killed the hikers sounds somewhat believable. But at the end of the day, if you really dig into it, it doesn't make enough sense. How would this explain the injuries suffered by the hikers? The coroner clearly said that a few of these injuries could not have been caused by a human, so that alone makes this theory very unlikely. Plus, the idea of them covering up every single one of their footprints seems far-fetched. Finally, the chum that was found in the area of the hikers' disappearances was likely for the sacrifice of a moose, which they would have then used for food. This seems to be confirmed by the moose antlers. It's now been practically debunked that the Mansi people ever even performed human sacrifices. As time has gone on, it has become somewhat clear that the Mansi people were used as an early cop-out as to what happened to these people. But years later, the theory has since been debunked, leading us to look for answers elsewhere. Our second theory is an explanation as to why the hikers fled their tent so quickly. For them to practically destroy their main piece of shelter, they had to have been certain that their lives were in danger. And they had to think that this danger was approaching so quickly that they had to leave without proper provisions. Because of this, and the location of the tent, many now believe that an avalanche had caused the hikers to flee that day. Though this specific area is not known for having frequent avalanches, they were camped at the base of a mountain, meaning that they could have been in a direct path of an incoming avalanche. This theory would explain why the hikers cut their tent open in such a hurry and left the safety of their shelter with only light clothing on. And for obvious reasons, this has been a widespread theory that many have settled on. However, it's not without issues. For starters, this theory doesn't explain how the hikers suffered such serious injuries. Remember, those who had suffered broken bones showed no signs of tissue damage near their injuries. This is significant because if an avalanche had caused a rock to strike them or caused them to crash into a tree or something like that, there would have been significant damage to their tissue around their broken bones. I mean, there would have been at the very least major bruising.
No
They would have
kidding.
been completely covered with cuts and scrapes from head to toe. Also, there was never any sign that an avalanche had taken place in that area that night. And though this is impossible to totally prove, scientists had agreed that it is unlikely that this ever took place. Now, despite this theory being practically ruled out, an avalanche still could be partially to blame. Perhaps the hikers had just thought that an avalanche was coming. Maybe they heard a loud noise or something like that, and they panicked and cut open the tent. And when they realized their mistake, they walked single file into the woods in order to get shelter in the trees. I think this situation sounds very rational, but it still doesn't explain what actually killed the hikers. If they really thought there was an avalanche, and that's what caused them to flee, then something outside of their shelter must have killed them. But what could have possibly caused such horrific injuries?
Like, I don't know about you, but it's not really normal for ice to be ripped out of someone's head.
With little to go off of in terms of rational theories, many have began looking to the supernatural as a cause for this tragedy, and the main talking point is typically the Yeti. Perhaps a large and violent creature was living in the remote area of the Diatlov Pass, and it took issue with the hikers being in its territory. This would explain why the hikers fled, and could also explain their unusual injuries. Now, this is a theory that I have never been very fond of, as the whole thing just kind of seems baseless. But doing a little more research on it, I've discovered why this theory has become so popular. As previously mentioned, multiple cameras were found at the campsite that belonged to the hikers. This photograph was taken at some point before the hikers had perished, but was generally taken in the area that they set up camp. After analysis, this photo has been completely proven to be 100% real, and the image has not been doctored in any way. What is seen on this photograph is widely open to interpretation. Personally, just looking at it without context, this really does look like some kind of Yeti Bigfoot creature, but others swear that it just looks like a man in snow gear. This image is haunting, and it only adds to the intrigue of this mystery. However, despite this looking somewhat like a Yeti, this theory still falls flat in many ways. The glaring issue here is that there were no footprints. Yetis are literally cold-weather Bigfoots, and not a single footprint of that thing was found, and it also doesn't totally explain the radiation found on the hiker's clothing. But considering we really don't know anything about Yetis, perhaps they give off some sort of radiation. But because of the lack of tracks and no real evidence other than the photograph, this remains just another theory at this point. Another popular supernatural theory for this case has been the idea that aliens were to blame for the deaths of the 9 hikers. For starters, bright lights in the sky were seen overhead of the Diatlov Pass on the night of the incident. Local Mansi hunters claimed that the lights looked like glowing spheres and matched the descriptions of the modern-day UFO. On the body of Semyon Zolotorov, a camera was found with extensive water damage. Despite the obvious damage from sitting in the freezing cold for 3 months, the film within it was eventually developed, which showcased something strange. Through all of the water damage, the photographs seemed to show that Zolotorov was photographing some sort of light form in the sky, though this could very well be just because of the damage done to the camera. Believers of the UFO theory link this to being an indication that Zolotorov was photographing UFOs moments before the hikers fled their tent, and and maybe this unidentified life form began coming after the hikers and causing them to flee. It is unclear what would have happened from there, but a popular belief is that the UFO caused the hikers to go into a trance. This made them walk down the mountain in a single file line. This would explain the radiation and the fleeing from the tent as well, and it could potentially explain the injuries found on the hikers. I mean, who knows what kind of weaponry or force that these aliens had? And if you believe this theory so far, you might not have a hard time believing that the aliens then attacked some of the hikers and killed them with their strange weaponry. Personally, this remains one of the most interesting theories to me.
Yeah, I told you this situation is really weird.
I can't totally commit to it, but with all that being said, it is hard to completely dismiss it. With just how unusual the events at the Diatlov Pass were, many have blamed a strange psychological occurrence on the deaths of the hikers. For starters,
Sometimes the Soviets were blamed.
on paradoxical undressing. This is a phenomenon when a person is suffering from hypothermia, yet they feel as if they are overheating. This burning feeling causes
I felt that before.
all of their clothing in an attempt to cool down, and this obviously ends up killing the person even quicker. This was initially used as the likely cause of the hiker's death, as it explained why so many were improperly prepared for the cold. Also, the extreme effects of hypothermia could have also caused the hikers to hallucinate or hear things, and thus flee from a non-existent threat. And at the surface, this could appear to be the case, but digging deeper, I have to discredit this theory. For starters, the last remaining 4 hikers took the clothes from those who perished in order to stay warm. Also, a fire was found by the first 2 hikers who had passed away. All along the Diatlov Pass were signs and evidence that these hikers were actively looking for warmth and trying to stay alive. Plus, this theory does nothing to explain the injuries that the hikers had faced, and for these reasons, this likely isn't what killed the 9 hikers. Another psychological theory has been that the area around the Diatlov Pass produces low-frequency wind, which creates what is known as a Kármán vortex street. This ultra-low frequency is said to cause panic attacks to many of those who experience it. So maybe the hikers heard this and fled their tent due to this paranoia, and by the time they made it down the mountain, they realized their mistake, but it was too late. Now obviously again, this doesn't explain how the hikers suffered such grotesque injuries, and it really just falls flat as well. But I also tend to have a hard time believing these psychological theories, simply because of the number of people present at the time of this tragedy. For all 9 hikers to have experienced the same psychological phenomenon, and for all of them to react in the same way, seems incredibly unlikely. No 2 minds are alike, so the idea that all 9 of them would collectively act in a way that would surely get them killed doesn't make any sense. I mean, not one of them realized that fleeing the tent was a crazy thing to do, or maybe this was all part of it. Maybe the group had a disagreement, which caused a fight. Maybe some members of the group began to slowly lose their minds, while the others remained sane. And these clashing mindsets may have led to a physical confrontation that would have caused the
I mean, that sounds possible or likely.
Things may have boiled over as the tent was ripped and the group fought outside in the cold. Realizing the mistake that they had all made, the group may have then calmed down as they realized that they would surely die if they continued fighting in the cold. This caused them to head for the shelter of the trees below. It's not a perfect theory, and again doesn't explain the horrific injuries, but then again the perfect theory doesn't seem to exist in a case like this. One of the theories that I personally like the best is that the Soviets covered up the real events of what happened. The Diatlov Pass incident was initially buried by the Soviet government for nearly 3 years after it had happened, and once it was finally revealed to the public, inconsistencies in its reporting and in its autopsies.
I mean, the Soviets covered up Chernobyl.
What we actually know about this case is from the early Soviet reports, meaning that they could have misconstrued the information of the case in such a way that they knew no one would ever discover the truth. But if this is true, then what could they have been hiding? Well, piggybacking off of the previous theories, the government would have had reasoning to cover up a Yeti attack or an alien attack for obvious reasons. And potentially, the military had come in after the group had encountered these things. One member of the search party even claimed that a pair of military boot footprints were found within the 9 hikers' single-file trail. This could indicate that the hikers were ordered down the mountain by a member of the military, and from there the group was taken care of. But the cover-up could have also been from a more probable theory. This event took place during the Cold War, and Russia was very obviously trying to develop new and powerful weapons. And for these weapons, they would typically test them in remote and desolate regions,
Yeah.
much like the area of the Diatlov Pass. So maybe Russia was testing rockets or bombs in the area, and when they went off, it terrified the hikers and caused them to run away from their shelter. And maybe these weapons had actually struck some of the hikers, causing their strange and terrifying injuries. It was even confirmed that rockets were shot at the direction of the Diatlov Pass from a military group somewhat near the area, but officials deny that the rockets would have landed anywhere close to the group. Whatever the case may be, the idea that the Soviets had some involvement in at least covering up the incident seems entirely possible, but the question still remains: why? Despite the countless theories offered for this event, none seem to really solve everything, and it is possible that due to the improper reporting from the Soviets, that the answers to this case will never fully be known. Hopefully someday new evidence will be released that blows the whole case wide open. But until that day arrives, the Diatlov Pass incident will remain one of the greatest mysteries the world has ever seen.
A nuclear accident. The most radioactive man in history. Hisashi Oshi. I hope I pronounced.
I brought in one of our first and old.
I hope I.
When I was a kid, my dad would tell me not to worry about making mistakes, because mistakes are an opportunity to improve. You take the experience, analyze it, and then move on and apply what you've learned. But some mistakes are so devastating and destructive that there's no coming back, no learning, and no correcting. We can only look on in horror as everything slowly disintegrates. In 1999, Japanese nuclear worker Hisashi Ouchi and his colleagues made a mistake while
Man, I
working
almost
in a
got that
nuclear fuel
right.
conversion company in Tokai. That mistake would lead to Ouchi being bedridden and unable to move for 83 days, where he would endure a sickening series of increasingly more painful injuries and illnesses, which would cause his body to slowly decompose while he was still alive, leaving him in a constant state of searing pain and suffering. This is his story. On the morning of the 30th of September, 3 Japanese nuclear technicians named Hisashi Ouchi, Yutaka Yokokawa, and Masato Shinohara arrived at the JCO nuclear fuel conversion facility in Tokaimura for their day's work. The JCO plant wasn't a power generating facility, but rather one which created the fuel rods for other power plants. They did this by a process of converting uranium hexafluoride into uranium dioxide. This would be the Tokaimura plant's first batch of fuel in 3 years. As such, there were no dedicated trained staff for this role, and whichever technicians happened to be available at the time fulfilled this role. The approved procedure to make this fuel is that the uranium powder is dissolved in nitric acid in the dissolution tank. This pure mixture is then pumped into a much taller storage tank called a buffer tank. It would then be slowly transferred into a wide tank called a precipitation tank where it could be mechanically stirred. The design of the buffer tank prevented the fuel from going critical because of its tall cylindrical shape and the fact that the mixture wasn't properly mixed yet. The purpose of this design was to control the flow of mixture into the larger precipitation tank to prevent the mixture from going critical as it was stirred mechanically.
Good idea.
The approved concentration of the uranium powder for this process is 5%. 3 years prior to this date, the JCO company had modified the official procedure so that the uranyl nitrate solution could be made in stainless steel buckets by hand, rather than placing the ingredients into the dissolution tank.
Are you
This
effing
was
serious?
illegal and against government regulations, but had never led
That
to
is a
any
very bad idea.
concentration of uranium which was used. When the 3 workers arrived that day, the plant was already 2 days behind schedule for delivery of the nuclear fuel.
Who cares? Take your
The
time.
company put pressure on staff to complete the procedure as quick as possible, and so the technicians modified the procedure even further. They were now mixing the uranyl nitrate solution in steel buckets and pouring it directly into the large precipitation.
Oh my
They were
god.
also using a uranium concentration
If you're gonna do that, you might as well go shoot yourself, because that is a really good way to kill yourself.
10:55 a.m. after the precipitation tank
Standing above that is not gonna be a good idea.
uranyl nitrate solution, the radiation alarm sounded, and the 3 workers reported seeing a blue flash.
Yep,
This
you're
direct
dead.
radiation signaled that the mixture was generating enough heat to start a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction.
By the way, a little bit of English. A little bit of knowledge here. When something radioactive produces a blue light, that's one of the worst things you could probably see. That means that, like, if you're within like a 50-foot radius of that blue light, you're effed. You're dead. Like, you are going to die.
Neutron radiation. Ouchi absorbed the highest dose of radiation as he had his body pressed against the tank to assist in pouring, while Shinohara was standing on a platform pouring the liquid into the tank. Yokokawa was sitting at a desk a few feet away and received the smallest dose of radiation. The internationally acknowledged radiation safety limit per person per year is 20 millisieverts. The dose considered to be
It's like
fatal is 5,000
oh,
millisieverts.
no.
Ouchi received 17,000 millisieverts of radiation, 3 times the amount considered lethal. Shinohara received 10,000 and Yokokawa 3,000. Almost immediately, Ouchi and Shinohara felt waves of pain and nausea, and both struggled to
Vomiting.
breathe. And the 3 men fled to a nearby changing room where Ouchi vomited and passed out. The 3 men were sent to the hospital with the 2 most irradiated, Ouchi and Shinohara, quickly transferred to the University of Tokyo Hospital, as it had more modern facilities, more qualified staff, and cutting-edge procedures and treatments. When the nurses initially tended to Ouchi, they couldn't believe that he'd received a fatal dose of radiation.
先生が下から上に連れてきて、ICU の中であったんですけども、そのまま個室にいつものようにストレッチャーで普通の入院患者さんみたいに入ってきて、1日で一気に日焼けをしちゃったぐらいの赤さを。
Yeah, his arm is badly swollen. He said he was in pain in that area.
He was also alert, talkative, and friendly. One of the nurses commented that she thought that he might be able to go home that day.
I thought at the time he wouldn't have to die, that he'd be enough to leave this hospital.
It wasn't until the test results came back that the real problem was revealed. The human body is maintained by a function of many different cell types being shed or excreted
And destroyed.
and then replaced by a new cell.
Shed and
Our
destroyed.
chromosomes contain the instructions
Shed and
for the
destroyed.
replication of all cell types. These instructions are incredibly important
And what radiation does, it mutates your DNA. And can radiation cause mutations? Absolutely yes. And no, these radiations are not, you get a third arm or you have 3 eyes. No, the radiation causes negative mutations by, deformity. Some parts of the body will be deformed, burns. How it mutates is it goes into it damages the DNA, and basically, imagine this. Imagine your cells like this. You read a book about Legos, right? And you say, hey, this is what's going to happen. You take that book, you take your Legos, you build them, like you build your little house, and you do that. You do that again and again and again and again, trillions of times a day. That's what cells do. However, when radiation occurs, imagine if I took that manual and I soaked it in water for half an hour, I pulled it out, and then I splattered paint all over it. And I told you, I need you to build this house. Well, if you took your Lego bricks, it's going to look kind of weird, not like the instructions. That's how deformities work. Or they're kind of like that.
Doctors examined Ouchi's test results. They understood the size and magnitude of the problem. Normal chromosomes can be arranged and identified quite easily. But
Karyotypes.
chromosomes had been decimated by radiation, leaving them unorganized, malformed, mutated, and in some cases fused. The radiation had literally ripped apart his DNA and scrambled it to the point where the cell instructions were no longer usable inside his body. While his body could no longer create new cells, it did still have a supply of cells which had been created before the radiation had destroyed his chromosomes. This explained why his outward appearance looked healthy. When that supply of cells ran out, Ouchi's real nightmare would begin. Ouchi's white blood cell count plummeted to 10% of what is considered normal and healthy, making him very vulnerable to viral and bacterial into a sterile room. Dr. Mayakawa was the doctor in charge of the team who would attempt to save Ouchi's life. Their first priority was Ouchi's inability to generate new cells. Without this, saving Ouchi's life would be impossible. After some discussion, Dr. Mayakawa suggested that the best course of action would be to try an experimental new procedure called peripheral blood stem cell transplantation. This is a procedure in which the healthy stem cells are harvested from a donor and then administered intravenously into the patient. The cells then migrate to the bone marrow and override the damaged ones, enabling the bone marrow to begin creating healthy cells again. The only issue was the donor would need to be a good match for Ouchi, and so they began testing potential donors. Luckily for Ouchi, his sister was a perfect match, and so healthy cells were harvested from her and administered to him through an IV. It would be 10 days before the team would know if the treatment was working. Knowing that the chances of success were slim, and the family were likely to cling to any faint hopes, Dr. Mayakawa allowed the family to see Ouchi on a daily basis in the hope that seeing his rapid decline would help them to accept the reality of what was happening.
真実を受け入れていただくという努力はしました。決して綺麗事ではなくてですね、やっぱり、そのすごい放射線による
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
変化が起こりますから、それはそれなりに真実として受け入れていただくように毎日毎日見ていただいてましたけどね。
Ouchi seemed either in a state of denial or obliviousness about his condition. As he asked the nurse, when you're exposed to radiation like this, is there a risk of contracting leukemia or something? Demonstrating that he didn't understand, that it was unlikely he would live long enough for leukemia to kill him if he did contract it. Over the next few days, Ouchi would deteriorate as his skin cell stores were quickly exhausted. As his skin lost its elasticity and solidity, it began to fall off, and staff noticed that whenever they removed medical tape, it would also peel thick pieces of skin away from Ouchi's body. The doctor then stopped any further use of medical tape against his skin.
Hey, stop using these for ear cleaning. They're even banned to use in the United Kingdom.
So?
At times, Ouchi would struggle to breathe, as fluid started to build up on his lungs. The team considered putting him on a respirator, but after seeing him tell his wife how much he loved her, they decided to wait and allow them both time to speak for a little longer.
大内さん、多分その頃はすごいいろいろ体
Didn't
体
seem
の
that he
悪
got
さ
her
とか
strength
が出
just
て
to
きて、お
speak.
話しするのも多分それこそ、お話しするのも力がいるっていうかそういう感じだったと思うんですね。それでもなんかこうちょっと優しい口調で少し笑いながら奥さんに愛してるよとおっしゃってて、でもそういうのがやっぱり伝わってくると私たちは辛いですよね。
It would, however, be very short-lived, as the next day, Ouchi could no longer breathe, and he was intubated and given respiratory assistance. While nobody knew for sure what would happen to Ouchi, the staff understood that he was unlikely to survive, and he was very likely to deteriorate. The family visited every day, and each day they would fold a paper crane. They wanted to put a crane by his bedside, but the risk of infection was too great.
In what did I say? In Japanese legend, a person who folds 1,000 paper cranes is said to be given two things by the gods: a wish and or good health and recovery. That's interesting.
After Ouchi was given his sister's stem cells, the test results came back, and Dr. Mayakawa called a meeting to discuss the results. Everyone was hoping to see his sister's chromosomes living inside his blood cells. As they peered into the microscope at his blood cells, they saw two red dots, which signified that the sister cells were alive and healthy. Ouchi was the first person in the entire world to receive this treatment, and it had worked. Over the next few days, his white cell count would continue to increase to normal levels, and the risk of infection dropped significantly. A week later, and Ouchi's skin began to deteriorate again, and an endoscope of Ouchi's intestines confirmed Dr. Mayakawa's worst fear. Ouchi's mucous membranes had turned white and drooped down, signaling that they had died. The mucous membranes are responsible for absorbing nutrients and fluids from the food we eat. This meant that Ouchi would not be able to retain water and nutrients. By this point, Ouchi had become hostile towards the staff, and said that he just wanted to go home. In an attempt to get answers, the team examined Ouchi's blood again. This time, instead of seeing the healthy cells they saw before, they saw mutated cells that had been corrupted by the radiation inside Ouchi's body. Ouchi's body had absorbed so much radiation when he was exposed that it had damaged the transplanted cells from his sister, even though there was no radiation source here anymore. The medical team and Ouchi's family were devastated. Shortly after, Ouchi began to experience gastrointestinal pain and discomfort as his body excreted 3 liters of diarrhea every day.
Oh my god.
After 3 weeks, his intestines began to bleed from the wound where the mucous membrane had died and peeled away.
This is exactly why radiation poisoning sucks.
On some days, he was given 10 transfusions in a single day. The team tried a variety of drugs to help improve some of the symptoms, but none would stay in his system long enough because of the diarrhea and bleeding.
Because when you have diarrhea, you lose a lot of fluids.
To a specialist bed for the critically ill. A bed which tilts to improve systemic circulation and to prevent bed sores from building up on his skin. Once Ouchi's skin had fallen off, he started to lose fluids rapidly. He lost approximately 10 liters of body fluids every day, which had to be replaced with IV fluids. In an effort to try and retain what little layers of skin Ouchi had left, medical staff wrapped almost his entire body in medical gauze, hoping that this would keep the skin in place and help him to retain fluids. But it didn't help. His weeping and bleeding skin would exudate profusely, and the bandages would be completely soaked in blood and fluids in just a few hours.
A day after day, we had a lot of extra. It took almost half a day to treat it. He was surrounded by a lot of doctors who treated his skin, but he seemed to feel severe pain.
Because his eyelids had mostly fallen off, Ouchi's eye would get dry and bleed. And due to the level of pain that he was in, he was given large doses of narcotics to help him sleep and ease the pain. Dr. Mayakawa spoke with Ouchi's family to advise that he was very unlikely to improve, and that he could get worse still. The family asked him to do all that he could to save Ouchi's life, but the only thing that he had left to try was massive skin grafts from lab-cultured skin. Dr. Mayakawa hoped that if the skin took, that it would help keep the fluids and buy them time to find other ways to help him. Unfortunately, due to the sheer volume of fluids lost through the exposed areas of his body, the skin grafts wouldn't adhere and they quickly fell off.
助かる見込みが非常に低いということが、客観的に誰の目にも明らかだ。ただし、誰もあまりそれは公に口には出しませんでしたけど、もうやはりみんな誰しもがそう感じてたと思います。ただ、それを誰かが言い出すと、全体のその士気といいますか。
It had now been 2 months since Ouchi had first been admitted. He had undergone repeated blood transfusions, skin grafts, he'd been given stem cell transplants, he was breathing through the use of a mechanical respirator, his skin had rotted away, his eyes couldn't close even when he slept because he had no eyelids, he was bleeding from his intestines and he was in searing pain at all times. But he was alive. The massive blood loss and
That sucks, because he's alive, and he feels this.
Ouchi's heart was pumping at over 120 beats per minute, the same rate as if he was running a marathon. The stress on his cardiac muscle was immense. And then, it stopped. Due to the lack of a do not resuscitate order, the medical team were legally bound to do their best to bring him back to life again, and so they quickly performed cardiac massage. His heart started beating again, but then promptly stopped. The team administered cardiotonic drugs to assist them, and after stopping and starting 3 times, it returned to a steady, yet very fast beat. The stopping and restarting of his heart had a negative effect on Ouchi's brain and kidneys. Function was beginning to decline. When Ouchi's family called to him, he no longer had any response, and he was entirely dependent on medical equipment for survival. While Ouchi's family had not yet given up, his body was telling a different story. Ouchi's immune cells had become abnormal and were attacking what healthy white blood cells he had left. In a short space of time, he had no white blood cells at all. Even a common cold could kill him in a matter of hours. On the 81st night after Ouchi was admitted, Dr. Mayakawa gathered the family members in a visiting room and advised them that Hisashi Ouchi could not be saved, and that should his heart stop again, he shouldn't be revived. The family agreed and signed a do not resuscitate order in the hopes of sparing Ouchi any more pain. On day 83, Ouchi's wife and son visited him for the last time. The medical staff removed the gauze from his face so that they could look at him for one more time. And then, on the 83rd night of Hisashi Ouchi's brutal battle for life, his heart stopped and he passed away.
Thank God he's dead. Not because to take with a grain of light, I'm glad he passed away from that. He did not deserve to suffer that. Like, it's sad. I'm sad that he's dead, but I'm glad that he doesn't have to suffer that pain anymore. I would rather be burned to death. I'd rather have somebody, like,
Some people
stab
have
me
suggested
to
that the
death.
doctors kept him alive against his will so they could test experimental treatments on him, that he begged to die. Some people reference this photo in their articles and videos. None of that is true, and that photograph is from a medical textbook about burns victims. The truth is, the medical staff used every tool in medicine to try and save Oluchi's life at the request of his family. The truth is, one simple mistake was the difference between a normal day at work and the most agonizing death imaginable.
City's getting pretty big. I'm going to take a break. I'm gonna go get my lunch.